We all have this thing in our minds, this thing that we think about all the time, every day, that impacts everything we do, and yet we're not allowed to talk about it. I was 6 years old. I was really young.
And I think there's a misconception that investing is similar to gambling. With the internet, it's so easy to kind of fall into these get-rich-quick schemes.
Yes.
And investing is sometimes seen as that. What is the difference between investing and gambling?
Investing is different because investing is doing research and looking at trends and understanding reports. Like, it's not get rich quick. If anyone is telling you that they got rich quickly, run. It doesn't work that way.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to A Millennial Mind. I know I said I was leaving the studio last week, but I'm back with one really special guest for you all today. We are going to learn all around how we invest to save for our future, to show our children, and to really understand the stock market and the figures and the numbers, because we're really not told about this in school. So before we start this episode and you get a masterclass on how to invest in yourself and your future, I'd be so grateful if you could press the like, follow and subscribe button so that I can bring more incredible conversations like this to you. I'm so excited for you all to hear this episode because I learned so much, and I'm sure you will too. Let's get into the episode. Simran, hi.
Hello.
Welcome to Millennial Mind.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so happy we fit this in because we have been trying to meet for years now.
It's funny that you say years because it's actually true. It's not like a couple of weeks, years.
Years?
Like 2022 onwards.
And also, I just came back from New York and I was really hoping that we were going to be there at the same time, and we just missed each other. And very coincidentally, I messaged you yesterday and we were like, let's just record a podcast today, which I think is crazy that the studio was free, you were free, I was free. Like, it's all come in total alignment, which is why I'm so excited for this episode, because I feel like I'm going to learn so much and we're going to be so energetically connected throughout. So I also think that at the moment in the UK, there's a huge cost of living crisis.
Yes.
But money just isn't related to that. It's related and tied to relationships. It's tied to mental health. It's tied to our own relationship with ourselves and how we value ourselves and how confident we feel. So I think money is a topic that we don't speak about, but it's so entwined in every element of our life.
I completely agree. And I think that's why I don't understand why people say, like, don't talk about money, it's so taboo, or, you shouldn't ask questions. It's like we all have this thing in our minds, this thing that we think about all the time, every day, that impacts everything we do, and yet we're not allowed to talk about it.
When did you first start talking about money?
I was very young, and I used to go to my friends' houses, and if my friend had a really nice house, I would look at them. And I know my parents would hate this, and I would say, what do your parents do for a living? And I learned very quickly that you can't do that, but I would still do it because at home my parents would talk to me about money, and I would just, now I use the word curious, but back then I was just a very nosy kid. And I would ask my parents, like, oh, why did we buy like a Nissan when so-and-so's mum and dad have a BMW? My parents would say things like, they were really good. They would be honest and say, well, we want to buy our cars in cash, so we're just going to buy what we can afford. And, so-and-so's parents might have bought it using credit, and nothing wrong with that, but they have to still pay that money back over time.
Right.
And so they were very good with me, and I would ask them, well, how much do you make, mum? Or how much do you make, dad? How much did the house cost? Why do you use a credit card? Like, I just always was really, really nosy. But it was good because being nosy means you learn things quite quickly.
I love that perspective, because I think now there's a phenomenon of be curious, really like ask a lot of questions, and it's seen as such a positive thing.
Just be nosy.
But I had the same experience when I was younger, but mine was stop asking all the time. Stop asking why to everything. You don't need a reason for everything.
Who said that?
My grandma. And she still says that to me, by the way. So it's really interesting because I'll ask her a question and she says, I was brought up in an age where we weren't allowed to ask questions. And we weren't allowed to ask why, we just got along with it. So when I ask her, well, why do you still do this tradition? Or why do you still practice this ritual? Yeah. That's her response to me. And at first I used to find it really annoying.
Yeah.
But now I look at it and I just think,
you understand where she's coming from and why she is projecting her experience.
Because she's not telling me not to ask. She's telling me she doesn't have the answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think so much of the time when I'm asking, oh, why do we do this ritual? Why do we do that? I'm always looking for an answer. and she doesn't have one to give me. And instead of saying to me, hey, listen, I'm sorry I didn't ask those questions, and I don't know why I do this, and I don't know why I'm trapped in this ideology, but I feel like I have to follow it. Her response is, look, I grew up in a generation where we weren't allowed to ask questions and we should just listen. And before I used to look at that and think, oh my God, she's just telling me to just go along with something. And, I'm not going to do that. But as I've gotten older, I've had to understand that they weren't given the permission to ask. They weren't given the strength or the confidence to believe that they were deserving of that knowledge.
Yeah.
It was just, you'll do what you're told. And now we've come into a generation where we're asking why we're doing the things we're told. It's confusing for them. So understanding that perspective was interesting to me. But relating that back to what you just said around money and how you felt you weren't able to ask questions, how did you still feel comfortable to go and ask that? Because you just said you learned very quickly that I wasn't able to ask that, but I continuously did.
I think I have this self-belief in myself that at the time really had no merit to it or no reason for it. But I just always knew that there was nothing wrong in asking questions. And
Really?
even when people said you shouldn't ask, it wasn't like I was actually I take that back. I was rebelling. It was just my little way of rebelling. I would go to the Gurdwara, and my parents would say this is what we do here, or this is the ritual we do, and I would say why. Or I remember if I met myself as a kid, I would be quite annoyed because kid, just a little smart ass essentially.
Right.
But what I love about my parents is they never stopped me from asking questions, and if they didn't know the answer, they'd say, I don't know. And I still have so much respect for the teachers in my life that would say, look, I'm not sure, but let me go away and come back and tell you what I find. Because it taught me that people don't always have the answers and it's okay to be wrong.
Right. And so when did you, I love that analogy, by the way, because I think a lot of the time we always talk about, if someone doesn't know the answer, they're stupid.
Yes.
That's not true. It's just we're kind of in this world right now where we all feel we have to say something. And sometimes it's actually better to say nothing than to just say something.
I think it's smarter to say, I'm not sure, and I will come back to you.
Yeah, I agree. So you learn about money as a child. Were you fearful of money?
Was I fearful of money? No, I think I was just interested in it and interested in the impact that it had.
Right.
And there was a lot of just not understanding. I think I was very interested in hey, wait, my parents have good jobs. My dad was a software engineer. My mum was a teacher. And yet we don't have as many things as other people whose parents have similar jobs or, maybe don't have as much. But why do they have 3 houses? And why do my parents only have 1? And it didn't come from a comparison of, oh, we're not good enough. Or,
right.
Because I always felt we had plenty, but it was more the maths isn't making sense. And that just really would stump me. And just having that curiosity, and then, my friends would be like, oh, well, my grandparents grew up in this country. My grandparents had an inheritance to pass down to my parents. And I was like, oh, well, my parents don't. So they're the first generation to do things themselves. And it was just interesting. I would just always just trying to figure out, I would love a lovely lifestyle for myself. I would love a life that is free and where I can do what I want. So what do I need to do to get to what I see?
Right. And what did you find?
Oh, good question. I realized that it wasn't just get a good job, be smart and save, because that's what we get told, right? If you want a nice house, if you want a nice car, if you want, freedom of time, we get told, well, Simran, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an engineer, pick one, and your life is sorted. And I think that's a very South Asian
100%
way of growing up, or Asian way of growing up. And what I realized is I think investing is the answer or the key, the missing link, because if you save, if you put £300 away every single month for 45 years, you start working at 20 and you do it until you're 65, you'll have about £160,000 saved. That's not bad. That's not a lot of money to retire on, £160,000. Put the same money, £300 a month, every single month for 45 years into a broad market index fund. That's £1.1 million. Those are 2 very different retirements. And the only difference is investing versus saving.
When did you first learn about the term investment?
This is a little bit odd. I was 6 years old. I was really young. And I was at school. And this girl on the playground, because I'm 6 years old.
Okay.
Set the scene. she was like, oh, my dad told me about what those numbers mean on the news. Because back in the day, 6 p.m. news, you'd have like, then there'd be like a now the market update.
Yes.
And it would have like all these different things with like green arrows up or red arrows down. Do you remember those?
Yes, I do, yeah. And it was like hundreds on the screen.
Yes.
Or like 30, 40 actually, not hundreds. You could see it very clearly what it said.
And there would be like 0.07 or up. And I remember, and it would have things that sometimes I understood and things I didn't. Like it'd have USD, and I'm like, well, I know that's like a US dollar. But then it would have letters I didn't understand. And she was like, my dad told me what those mean. Now I understand them. Her name was Jessica.
What school did you go to?
A public school.
Gosh. When I was 6 years old in a playground, someone was like throwing their lunchbox at me, you know? Like someone was sharing their cheese and onion packet of crisps with me. It was not, hey, I was watching the news last night and I understand what USD means.
It wasn't, hey, I understand share market tickers. No, she was very lucky. And it was a semi-nice area, but a public school. And I went home and I said to my dad, like, I was waiting for the 6 o'clock news. And I was like, Dad, can you tell me what those mean? Because like my friend knows it. I want to know it too. And my dad tried to explain it to me and it made no sense.
Obviously, when you're 6 years old.
But I was really determined.
Like, wow, I'm so far behind in life. What was I doing at 6? I don't even remember.
It's like, how am I going to say
We're learning about the bloody stock market.
And it didn't make sense, understandably. No one's answered it that way, which is absolutely the right answer. Understandably, I didn't understand it. And I remember just thinking, oh, well, I guess this like numbers thing isn't for me. And you're 6. It was such a formative time in my life. And I know not everyone has a story of, I tried to learn about the share market, but everyone has a story of, I was curious about money and then one person maybe tried to explain it and it didn't make sense. So I shut myself off it for the rest of my life.
Yes, 100%.
Do you know what I mean?
100%.
And so it wasn't until university where the idea of investing came up again. And this was when a friend was telling me, he was like, oh, I know this guy. He's in medical school. I was in optometry school. And he was like, he's learning to invest and he's paid off his student loans from investing. And I just remember thinking, okay. And I asked, well, how did he learn? And my friend said his it works in finance.
Right.
And I shut it off again. I said, well, my dad doesn't work in finance, so I guess I'll never learn how to invest. And so again, just I was so quick to say, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good at this. But I am smart. You know, I'm studying a healthcare degree. I'm getting good grades. There were all these indicators that I can learn what a share is, and yet for the majority of my like young life, I just thought I'm not a numbers person. And I can't remember what the push was, but I guess it was a mixture of realizing that, you know, I saw the women around me and my family, and I saw how money impacted their lives, and I saw that they didn't really have much of a say in the life that they lived because their husbands were the breadwinners and their husbands made the choices of the family. And that was the life I didn't want for myself.
Yes, I love that.
So that's when I started learning. My university offered elective papers are papers you can do outside of your degree.
Right.
So one of them was a finance paper. And so that's kind of how the journey began. And I started learning how to grow better with money. And it just sparked a curious side of me.
That is so inspiring. And I also think that so many people will resonate with what you just said. Because, like I said at the start of this podcast, money is something we're not taught about, and yet it impacts every single person on this planet. And it doesn't just impact the way in which we live our life in terms of the material things we can buy, which I think is a direct correlation with money.
Yes.
But it also impacts our decision making in terms of, do I stay with this person? Do I stay in this house? Do I stay in this relationship? Do I invest into this relationship? Do I invest into my business? Do I invest into myself? And, you know, I think that we are kind of told the appropriate things we can do with money, right? So investing in education, great, go ahead and do it.
Absolutely.
No problem. Invest in a business, not sure. And I think there's a misconception that investing is similar to gambling.
Yeah.
So when you are learning about this, like I'm just trying to put myself in your position. If I'm 18 and someone said, hey, by the way, my friend's dad has told me about investing, the natural response would be like, it's a scam. You know, like it's obviously, I don't want to learn this from like an 18-year-old. Like it must be a scam. Someone's trying to scam me. And I think that's because with the internet, it's so easy to kind of fall into these get rich quick schemes.
Yes.
And investing is sometimes seen as that. It's not. But you look at an investment and you hear someone say their story of, I invested and I paid off my student loan. And that seems like an exciting output and something that's quick. It just makes it seem like, oh, I paid off my student loan. No one's going to say I paid off my student loan in 30 years or 20 years.
Exactly.
Right? But the sentence is, I paid off my student loan. So in that moment, or, you know, if someone's listening right now, what is the difference between investing and gambling?
It's a really good question. And the difference between investing and gambling, I used to get this confused myself because, you know, you hear stories and everyone's got a story. My uncle lost all his money in the 1989 crash. But gambling is when you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to put my money into a company and I think it's going to do well. Like maybe it will trend upwards. I'll put in $1,000 and like cross my fingers. And we have a term for that. It's called speculative investing, where you're making a decision based on speculation. So very simple. Investing is different because investing is doing research and looking at trends and understanding reports. And, you know, if I look at an investment that I want to put my money into, because now I also angel invest and I invest in venture capital, I look at, you know, what is this founder like?
Right.
What's their goals? Why are they trying to grow this company? Are they just trying to get acquired? In which case they're going to try and do a lot of things really quickly to make it look nice, package it up beautifully and sell it off? Or is this a legacy company that they're going to create for their family? In which case it has to do well long term because this is something they'll pass on to their children and grandchildren. And so when you're trying to take all these different data points, you're looking at balance sheets and you're looking at income reports, you can then make a very clear decision on, is this something that's going to work long term? It's not, I'm buying this to, you know, buying it at 2 o'clock to sell it at 5 o'clock for a little bit more money. That's day trading. It's, I'm going to put my money into this so that after 5+ years, you know, if I put in $100, I hope to at least make $150 off it. It's not getting rich quick.
And I think that's the problem that we see online is we've been kind of sold this narrative that you can invest into this stock to get rich quick. And that intrigues people. I watched a documentary yesterday called Explained on Netflix.
Oh, yes.
Have you seen it?
I've seen the money one.
The money one, right? And it was about get rich quick schemes. And what really intrigued me, which I should have known, but again, I don't, is that these get rich quick schemes have been happening for years, like decades. And it's just now with the internet, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
And I think that the investment strategies that you can, you know, invest in Hargreaves and Lansdowne into like a stocks and shares ISA is seen to be like an internet investing thing that you're trying to get rich quick from. And it's really hard because I think that when you come out of university and you start your job, you know, a lot of people aren't earning that much and therefore they don't have a lot of money aside. And so investing always seems like you should only do that when you have enough money to lose and you have enough money to like have all your basics done. But in my opinion, I think those basics constantly change, right? You'll be like, I just need to get a car. Well, now I need to get a nicer car. I just need to get a house. Okay, but now I want to save up for a bigger house.
Yeah.
What I think is really difficult is the myth that people have that they need a lot of money to invest. Do you think that's true?
It's very true. It also comes from, I understand why people think that way because it used to be true.
Okay.
And so if like 10 years ago you went up to a, you know, broker and you said, hey, I've got some money I'd like to invest, they would say like, until you have 10,000 pounds, 50,000 pounds, like come back.
Oh.
And they would turn you away. And this actually has not completely stopped. And there is a level of like, I would say racism and sexism in the industry. I knew someone who today had 10,000 pounds, went to a bank. She was like a young woman of color. And they said, come back when you have a few more zeros on the back of that number. They wanted her to come back when she had $100,000 for her first investment.
What?
So there's this like level of confusion and gatekeeping. So I understand why people say, oh, you need a lot of money to invest, because there are still people in the industry that will turn you away unless you have a lot of money to invest.
Hold on, why would you go to a bank to invest? What is she trying to invest in? I'm confused.
Some banks offer investment funds.
Right,
So,
and you can only go with them
yes,
if you have a certain amount of money.
apparently. I would say that
okay.
banker was wrong. That's not true.
Okay.
But that was the idea behind it. But
Got it.
you can, there's many different ways, there's many different investment funds. Some are individual, some are through banks, some are through property groups. But now we have online brokers, and you've just named some, and they're so much easier because the minimum to get started is like a single pound. You could invest £10.
Yes.
And you could be like, hey, I don't want to invest in individual companies. I want to invest in a fund, so a basket of lots of different companies. I don't know what's going to do well. I don't have time to research. And hey, I just want to put my money into the Footsie 100, which is a basket filled with the top 100 companies in the UK, all these well-known brands in different sectors, from like telecommunications to tech to healthcare. And I'm just going to put in, £50 a week or £100 a month. That's going to add up. But that's how you can start investing. And investing is not something you do once you have money. It is something that you do to grow your money.
So when you say you can invest £50 to £100, I think that is manageable for some people who are listening to this podcast. Let's just say somebody has £50 to invest a month, okay? Once they've kind of cleared all the other things that they've got. How do I know that the Footsie 100 in 20 years is definitely going to go up? Does history show that?
I would never use the word definitely, because you'll never know. There will always be a little bit of risk, but I think of risk as a scale, and there are some investments where the risk is slightly lower, and the Footsie 100 or any broad market index fund, so a basket filled with companies of the top companies in the US or the top companies in the UK or the top companies in Australia, they tend to be slightly lower on the risk scale because you're spreading your risk across 100 companies in the UK. For you to not make a profit after 20 years of having your money in the Footsie 100 means that all 100 companies have to fail. And if all 100 companies that are publicly traded, the top 100 in the UK, have failed, we probably have other problems going on.
Can you imagine? So I'm just taking this position from someone at home who is listening to this podcast thinking, okay, this all sounds great.
Yeah.
I understand now that it's not like gambling. I also understand that I think the Footsie 100 is probably a good option for me to kind of start with. What the hell do I do? Where the hell do I start?
I'm glad you asked, because there's 3 steps. One, you decide what you want to invest in. So we've already done that. Step 1, Footsie 100. The world's most famous or most popular index fund is called SPY, which is a ticker. And a ticker just means a name for the S&P 500, which is the Footsie 100's cousin that's American.
Got it.
So that's the top 500 companies in the US. And so what people do is they decide, well, okay, I want to invest in, let's say, one of those. You've chosen your fund. Number 2, you have to find a broker. A broker is like a bank account. Everyone has a bank account, but people have different banks that they use. It does the exact same thing. And so you choose an online broker. I mean, there's free trade, there's trading 212, there's ones with banks. There are so many out there. There's eToro, Robinhood in the US. They all do the same thing.
Right.
So don't get hung up on choosing your broker. As long as they're reputable, as long as you can look at their reviews and make sure that they're not, something shady, that's fine. You sign up, you make an account, and then once you're in, you will see all the different investments available on a dashboard in the exact same way that when you go online shopping on like ASOS, you see all the different clothes from all the different companies. And so there's all these different investments available. And so you might have a Footsie 100 fund by company A or a Footsie 100 fund by company B. They all invest in the same thing.
Right.
You click on it, you take it to the checkout, you pay your £10, set up an auto invest and say, hey, every month take £10 out of my account and put it into this fund. And then the last step is you just leave it. And you don't worry about it. And you don't hear on the news, oh, well, this is happening. Let me pull money out of that and put it in this other company. Or this is happening. You let it go. There was a study done by Fidelity, which is a US broker, and they wanted to see who were the best investors, who made the most money, and what were they doing. And they found that the best investors, I'm trying not to smile when I say this, the best investors were by people that had passed away. The best investment accounts were by people that had passed away because they weren't touching them.
You know, you said I'm trying not to smile. I was like, I bet you're going to say women. And then as you said pass away, I was like, that is so smart.
And the second best were women.
Really?
Female investors it's not a competition.
It is,
female investors do well. In the same company looked at a report. They looked at millions of investment accounts and found that female investors ever so slightly outperformed male investors, which is interesting because when you close your eyes and you imagine what does an investor look like, it's not a woman.
Why?
Why? I think it's because we don't have enough representation of female investors, and you can't be what you can't see. If you try and think who's done really well, and if you're into the finance world, you think of people like Warren Buffett, you think of people you think of Wolf of Wall Street, despite him, going to jail for security fraud, but you think of him, you don't think of
so true.
The female investors, because one, there weren't many of us to begin with, but two, it's just, it was just a different time. They didn't feel like what they did was worth sharing or that anyone would be interested or anyone would care.
You know why I also think, as you've just said that, is the Wolf of Wall Street, Bernie Madoff, all these people. It's almost, and I remember reading The Psychology of Money, and they were talking about this Indian guy that also committed this fraud or something. I can't remember his name. I don't know if he's Indian. I think he is. I don't know. Don't quote me on it. But in that book, when they were talking about these get-rich-quick schemes, I remember the fascinating thing that it said was the thing about money is that somebody who has had zero experience can actually make more than a professional themselves.
Yes.
Fascinating. And I remember looking at that thinking, so true.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the examples that he gave was, a lot of these people, the reason why like Bernie Madoff and this other guy who went to prison, they already had a lot of money. The reason they were competing in like Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes was all about ego. It was all about how much could they get away with it. It was actually a deeper thing. And I reckon that it's a bit sexier to get to the top fast. And women don't necessarily do that. And that's why their stories, there's probably been loads of women that have invested and their stories aren't shared because they've kind of just done it the boring old way.
That's very true.
Right?
And on our podcast at Girls That Invest, we interview female millionaires and we ask them, how have you made your money? And no one's ever just sat down and had a series being like, how did you make your money as a woman? How did you make your millions? And it's because their stories are, I joined Uber when it was, at the start of its journey, or I just had a normal job. I worked at CNN, went up the ranks and just invested into index funds for 30, 40 years. Or it's not get rich quick.
Right.
And I don't think if anyone is telling you that they got rich quickly, run. It doesn't work that way. If it was easy, we would all be doing it. We'd all be millionaires, but we're not because it's inconsistent. And someone telling you how to get rich quickly is getting rich off telling you how to get rich quickly.
Oh my God, that's such a good quote. I'm quoting you in that. That is so great. I actually wanted to speak to you about that because I think what becomes really difficult in the world that we live in today is the fact that we believe everyone is doing better than us in every area of your life. So the example when we were talking at lunch earlier was I always tell people to focus on 5 areas of their lives. Your career, your relationships, your health, your personal development, and your hobbies. Like, what do you do for you? And I think when we're looking at people online, we look at one element of their life and we compare it to our whole element of we compare it to our entire life. So I will look at somebody who has gone on holiday to the Maldives and be like, oh my God, they must be doing so well. They have the best relationship. Their body is amazing. They are so healthy. They must have all this money to do whatever they want. And therefore, they don't have to worry when they're on holiday in the Maldives. They have the perfect life.
They've got their life together.
And a lot of the time, what I find is that the people who share so much around their money are the ones that feel that they need to. You will never see somebody talking about how much money they earn, I believe, if they genuinely feel secure enough with how much money they earn, because they wouldn't be telling you. I don't need to. It's really interesting actually as well related to that. I think you can very, very quickly tell someone's insecurity by how much they speak about something.
I completely agree. Like when you were saying that about money, I would say that you can apply that to anything. Like the more they talk about their
100%.
relationship online, same issue.
And I feel like you're trying to justify it to me. And you don't need to. Like, you don't need to justify it to me. And it's the same with money.
Yeah.
Have you found the same thing by your platform and everything that you're doing in terms of helping women invest?
I find that, like, I'll speak about my experience. When I stopped doing it after a while, but when I first started Girls That Invest, like, the behind the scenes of it was me saying, hey, look, I am an optometrist, but I'm also an investor. And this is how I do it. And this is how I grow my wealth. And I would share my net worth, which, you know, once accounted for my student loan was about $8,000 of net worth, which was not a lot. And every single, I think, month or every single quarter, I would share an update. I'd say, hey, look, I've made more on the market slowly. I've definitely saved more. I'm saving towards a house deposit. Now I've bought the home. Now that's gone up, but now I have a mortgage. And I would slowly share these updates. And I thought that was really helpful. But I would get I love my family. My family would be like, you stop talking about money online. Like, stop sharing these updates because it's really crude and it's not nice. And on one hand, I thought that's true. And on the other hand, I thought, you know, if I share these numbers, it's going to be helpful. But I never sat down and said, look at how much I have for the sake of, you know, showing it off. And once I felt like I had enough, I actually stopped sharing those numbers. So I agree. I think it eventually it gets to a point where you're not helping people by sharing numbers, you're demotivating them.
I think it becomes to a point where it's no longer relatable, though.
It's no longer relatable.
And that's the thing. So, you know Ali Abdaal?
Yes.
He shares his numbers a lot.
Yes.
I really admire him for doing that. I always think about it. I think he started in 1 year and he was minus, like, I can't remember how much it was. Then the next year he was like up 20. And then he's like, yeah, this year I made 5.7 million or whatever he made.
Yeah.
And a lot of the comments like, oh my God, he's such a show off. And I'm like, no, a show off would be somebody sitting in a Ferrari being like, you want to know how to make money and sit in this Ferrari? I'm going to show you how. He's very methodical in the way that he's showing it. He's really much explaining, one, a journey of personal growth, two, about how much you should invest. Because what his numbers showed me was, yeah, I'm making 4.5 million. I'm spending 2.7.
I saw that.
And I was like, oh, crap. So you think someone's making this much money, but how much are they spending? How much are they actually investing into themselves? And investing in yourself is something that so many of us stop ourselves from doing. So from all the research that you've done, from all the millions of girls that you've helped, what's been the biggest blocker for them? Why is it that women feel that they can't invest?
We've asked this question a lot and we've done research and we've asked our community, and the number one reason is a lack of confidence, but a lack of confidence comes from a lack of knowledge. And so that's quite an easy fix. Right? If you don't know how to do something, once you learn the like blueprint of it, you're like, oh wait, that's it. Like, investing is not that hard. But then where do you get the knowledge from? And so the real blocker is, well, who do you trust and where do you get it from? And we found that people learn best when things feel like it's achievable and not when it's taught in a, I've done so well and I'm above you and you can follow my journey.
Yes.
It's when you are meeting someone at their level and there's no ego and you're like, hey, I'm just a person too. And this was my journey. And I started not knowing anything about investing, and now I would consider myself like a very confident and knowledgeable investor. And these are the things I'm learning, but also I don't know everything. I keep doing research, and then I take the research and share it with you. So we're all on this, you know, trajectory together. And I've never met in my life a person, man, woman, or child, who has not understood investing after it was explained simply, because it's not hard. Investing is taking your money, putting it in a vehicle and hoping that you have more money out the other side. If you can understand that, that's all investing is. Sometimes it's through a house. Sometimes it's through a company. Sometimes it's through cryptocurrency, a car, a Birkin bag, anything that can have value that goes up over time, hopefully goes up over time. That's all investing is. If you can understand that, you understand investing.
I think the biggest lesson I've learned as an adult is that there's multiple ways of learning.
Yes.
And I know that sounds stupid and obvious, but when you're in school,
stupid and obvious?
Well, you know, when you're in school, because I didn't learn in the way the teacher taught me, and then my parents would repeat that same learning pattern, I didn't understand certain things, you know, and I was always told, oh my God, you're so stupid at maths and science. Like, you're so dumb. And then I used to think that for my whole life. And I remember, because I didn't get an A in business studies, I was once told, like, you'll never get business. Like, you'll never get it. You'll never understand it. And when I started my own business, that was the thought that was in my head. Like, you will never get business and you'll never understand it. And so I watched so many YouTube videos. I listened to so many podcasts. I read loads of books. And yeah, I'm not the best, but I'm learning. And I think that's the shift that I always want to share with people as well, is that if you don't learn from one method, you can learn from another. If you don't follow the exact footprint or blueprint that someone has laid out for you, there's so many more. And with investing and with money and with finances and with taxes, we weren't taught about it. Why?
I think that we didn't get taught about these things because the people teaching us didn't know them themselves. And we kind of expect that everyone that's an adult just knows the answer.
Yes.
But if our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation didn't know how to do something, how are they going to teach us? Our teachers are doing their best, and they're, in a system that is already so difficult, and they're so underpaid. My family are full of teachers.
So true.
And who's going to teach our teachers how to be good with money when they can barely, afford rent? And you want them to go out and teach our children on how to invest when they're like, I'm just trying to get by myself. I think the answer is hard, but I wanted to go back to what you said earlier. I think what I found so helpful, and probably the best gift my family ever gave me, was when I didn't understand something, they would go, oh, that's okay. We'll find you a new tutor. Maybe she'll explain it in a different way.
No way.
And so I would go through tutors until I found one that stuck with me, that I understood from. And I think that's where I learnt the skill of, if something doesn't make sense, it's not because I'm stupid, it's because I'm with someone that's not teaching in a way that I can understand. And I never in my life thought that there was something I couldn't like, if you gave me the challenge of learning rocket science, I feel like I could. I just need to find a podcast to teach me. And if there's no podcast, if I'm not an auditory learner, I need to find a YouTube video. And if that doesn't work, maybe I need to find a book. But for me, it was always, damn, there's not a lot of good teachers out there, rather than I'm stupid.
I think that the reason I'm getting emotional, the key difference you just described is you were told that you weren't the problem.
Yeah.
And the key difference was that I was told I am. And so I was speaking to my friend about this the other day, and I said, I always think I'm the problem.
Yeah.
And she was like, you're not the problem. And I've never understood why. And actually, just in that second, you've made me realize that a lot of the time I was told, well, you are the one that is the problem, not them. They know what they're doing. And you are the one that doesn't understand, and you are the one that is the problem. And we forget that these small things translate into every part of our life.
Never call a child stupid. That is like my one rule. Never call a child stupid. Children are not stupid. Children just need different way. And adults are not stupid. And you talk to women, women aren't stupid. Women just don't like being mansplained about finances.
Well, I think that it's also, we're kind of put into roles in society. Women are going to stay at home and look after and nurture and be mothering, and men are going to go out there, provide and work. And if it's a man's job to provide, it is a man's job to actually secure the future and to worry about investments. And I think that's also a blocker for a lot of women, because it's, one, it's not my role. Two, it's not within my nature. And three, I'm not going to be good at it.
True.
And like you said, that comes from knowledge. So if the first step is knowledge, but I think the deeper underlying reason is to identify with yourself as an investor.
Yes.
Identify with the ability that you can change that narrative about yourself. You weren't born an investor.
And neither were those men.
Exactly. I think so much we think of that, like, oh, they're born with it. No, they're not. They learned it. They were taught it.
Where do you think your husband is learning how to invest? He got the same life manual that you did. No one got anything, handed to them when they were born. They are reading books, or they're listening to podcasts, or they're asking their friends, and those are all things we can do as well. There was a study done by a company called Alavest, which they do a lot of fantastic work around like women's investments, and they found that most women during the later stage of life, where either their partners passed away and these women became widowed, or they got divorced, majority of them had a negative surprise when they got a chance to see what was happening with the family finances. They had spent like 50 plus years being like, oh, my husband's taking care of it. But their husbands were just humans and they were trying their best and they didn't know any better than, these women. And they were mismanaging their money on behalf of the family. And imagine spending like 50 years being like, my husband's taking care of it, my husband's taking care of it. And, sadly, when your husband passed away, you get your piece of paper of like, this is the will, that's what's left for you. And you could have managed it better yourself.
How do we manage it better? Because it's so overwhelming. I'm just thinking about this from a perspective of a 35-year-old person who's sitting at home right now, or a 30-year-old woman who's saying, yeah, great, everything you guys are saying is amazing. I want to learn. I don't want to be that widow. I want to make sure I'm in control of my finances. But what do I do? Because I do think that it's a very scary thing to now, when you're 30 years old, be like, now I'm going to identify myself with someone new. Now I'm going to learn a new skill on top of doing all the other billions of things that I do already.
It's an identity shift.
Exactly. How do they start?
It's so difficult. And I really sympathize with the idea of, shifting your identity, especially in a time when you're, being told like, oh, you are a wife first or you are a mother first. And to be like, wait, I'm also a student now and I'm going to learn and I'm going to change. That's hard. But I think the first step is just knowing where you are right now. And what I mean by that is taking a financial audit of your life, sitting down, pen to paper or Google Doc, Excel spreadsheet, depending if you're a type A or type B person, and saying, okay, on one column, I'm going to write down everything I have that is an asset. So that is going to be the cash in my bank account, the gold jewelry that I own, because that's things that you can sell. It's going to be the car I have if it's, paid in cash. Everything that I could sell for cash, that's maybe, more than $500 on one side of a table. Other side, all the debt that I have, my car loan, my mortgage, my student loan, payday loans, and just take your assets, minus that from your debts. That's your net worth. And that's really scary. It's not your personal worth.
Right.
And that's very important to distinguish.
Okay, what's the difference?
Oh, good question. Personal worth is who you are, how you view yourself. That's it. And if you view yourself with love and you care about yourself with love, that is worth so much more and so different to your salary and how much money you have. Because those don't align. I could lose everything, but I still have my self-worth.
A lot of people do identify themselves with the amount of money they have, but not only that, their job, their lifestyle, their friends.
But it doesn't matter. And it's easy to say it's easy to say now, and I understand the privileged position I'm in to say, well, now that I have all those things, I can realize they don't matter, because I did think they mattered. But if everything was taken away, I know my friends would still love me, my family would still love me, and I would still love me. And at the end of the day, I think it's, for me, like the connections I have that bring me the happiness, because it's not the things.
No, I actually don't think it is the things, because anytime you listen to someone successful talk about their journey, I saw this reel with Jim Carrey, and in it he said, I'm 2-time Golden Globe award-winning Jim Carrey. And when I go to sleep at night, I don't just dream normal dreams. I dream about being a 2-time Golden Globe winner. And then he goes on to talk about, when I go to sleep at night, I don't dream just normal dreams. And when I do this, I don't do this normally because I'm so amazing. And actually he just says, well, I'll just keep reaching these achievements because then I'll be enough. And so many of us believe that we need to hit an achievement to be enough. So many of us believe we need to get certain grades to be enough. And I feel like in our whole lives, we're all just trying to be enough, especially for me. Because in school, I wanted to be enough by getting good grades. In university, I wanted to be enough by doing so many extracurricular activities and graduating with a great job. Then in my job, I wanted to be enough because I wanted to be getting a good bonus from my performance review. And now I've got my business, I feel like I still want to be enough. And it's funny because you always have a milestone that's moving. And every year I say, oh, when I hit this, I'll be happy. When I hit this, I'll be successful. And I told you before we sat down today, I just don't believe I'm that successful. And you said, but you are. Or I said, I can't remember, I think I said, I just don't believe I'm that clever. When I'm doing something, I was sharing something, that I was doing something to hide an insecurity I had. And you were like, but you are. And I was like, but I'm not. And it's so interesting that the beliefs that we're told as children manifest into much bigger identities as we grow older. And that's why I think that now I'm really trying hard to rewire those thoughts and really think about, when I was younger, what was it that stopped me?
Yeah.
Because when you're 6 or 7, you're not born with these insecurities. You're not born feeling like you can't do something.
Hey everyone, I'm so sorry to stop the episode here, and I wish I was telling you about an ad, but I am here to tell you the truth as to why we've had to cut this episode. When we were recording the podcast, unfortunately, the camera angles here were now lost. The good news is, though, we still have the audio, so if you are enjoying this episode, you can continue listening to it on either Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcasts, and finish listening to this episode. I am so sorry, and I feel so upset that we've lost the video for this podcast, but I wanted to be really honest and truthful with you, and I really still wanted to release this episode because Simran provided us with so much value. So if you can, please forgive me, and please finish watching the rest of this podcast on any of the audio platforms that you find. Thank you so much always for your support, and hopefully next time you'll be able to watch the entire podcast with no issues.